I logged into our joint bank account on a Tuesday morning, expecting to see the usual balance. Enough to cover groceries, utilities, the mortgage payment due next week. Instead, I saw $11.67. I refreshed the page. The number didn't change. I checked the transaction history. One withdrawal, made yesterday at 3 p.m. Transfer to external account. Amount, $47,832.33. Our entire savings. Gone. I called David's phone. Straight to voicemail. Tried again. Same result. I texted him, "Where's the money?" No response. I drove to his office downtown. The receptionist looked uncomfortable when I asked for him. "Mrs. Carmichael, David doesn't work here anymore. He resigned 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks. He'd been leaving for work every morning for 3 weeks, getting dressed in suits, carrying his briefcase, kissing me goodbye at the door. Going where? Doing what? I drove home in a daze. Checked every room. His closet was half empty. His toiletries from the bathroom were gone. The photo of us from our wedding, the one that had sat on his nightstand for 12 years, was missing. David was gone, and so was everything we'd built together. He didn't even say goodbye. The knock came at sunrise 2 days later. I hadn't slept. Had spent 48 hours calling banks, checking accounts, trying to understand what had happened. A process server stood on my doorstep. Professional, apologetic. Grace Carmichael? Yes. You've been served. The envelope was thick, official. I signed for it with shaking hands. Inside were divorce papers, filed by David, already submitted to the court. I read through them in disbelief. Each page worse than the last. He was claiming I was emotionally neglectful, that I'd abandoned the marriage, that I'd refused to support his career, and he wanted everything. The house we'd bought together, my car, the one I'd paid for with my inheritance from my grandmother, and alimony. He wanted me to pay him monthly. Support. The man who'd emptied our bank account wanted me to pay him. I sat on my kitchen floor and laughed. Not because it was funny, because the alternative was screaming. My name is Grace Carmichael. I'm 41 years old, and I don't lose quietly. I'm not the type to scream or make scenes. I don't post drama on social media or call people in the middle of the night sobbing. That's not how I operate. When people betray me, I don't chase them. I don't beg them to explain or come back. I prepare. I document. I build a case so airtight they can't wiggle out of it. And David had no idea how prepared I already was. Because what he didn't know, what he'd never bothered to notice, was that I'm a financial analyst. I spent 15 years working for a firm that specialized in fraud detection and forensic accounting. I know how to track money. I know how to find hidden accounts. I know every trick people use to hide assets. And I'd been watching him for 6 months. The red flags started small, easy to dismiss, easy to explain away as stress or distraction. David stopped wanting to talk about finances. Used to be, we'd review our budget together every month. Sit at the kitchen table with our laptops and a bottle of wine, going through expenses and planning for the future. Then suddenly, he didn't have time, was always too busy. Said I was being controlling when I suggested we review our accounts. He got defensive when I asked questions. Why do you always have to interrogate me? Can't you just trust me? You wouldn't understand how business works? That last one was particularly insulting, given that I literally worked in finance. But I let it go. Didn't want to fight. He started taking calls in other rooms, closing doors, going outside to talk privately. His phone was suddenly password protected. Same phone that had sat unlocked on our coffee table for years. It's for work security, he explained when I noticed. Client confidentiality. I nodded. Didn't argue. Just made a mental note. Because I'd seen this pattern before. In cases I'd worked. In reports I'd analyzed. This was what financial infidelity looked like. And it usually meant other kinds of infidelity too. David's startup, the consulting firm he'd founded 3 years ago, was supposedly struggling. Always just on the verge of profitability, but never quite getting there. Give it 6 more months, he'd say. We're building something big. It just takes time. I supported him. Used my salary to cover most of our expenses while he invested in the business. Didn't complain when he worked late. Didn't question when he traveled for client meetings. But 6 months ago, I'd been cleaning his home office and found a folder of invoices. Client payments. 25,000 here, 14,000 there, 32,000 from a consulting project he'd never mentioned. All dated within the past year. All marked paid. I photographed every page, uploaded them to a secure cloud. Drive. Said nothing. Then I started checking more carefully. His laptop when he left it open. His briefcase when he wasn't looking. The mail before he could sort through it. I found bank statements for an account I didn't know existed. Business account, supposedly, but the expenses weren't business-related. Luxury hotels, fine dining, jewelry purchases, a lease agreement for an apartment in the city. I documented everything. Screenshots, photos, downloaded statements when I could access them. Built a timeline in a spreadsheet that tracked every suspicious transaction. And I waited. The morning after the divorce papers arrived, I went to my storage unit. The one David didn't know about. The one I'd rented under my maiden name, using money from my separate account. Inside was a safe. Inside the safe was a hard drive. Backup of everything. Every email I'd found forwarded to a secret address. Every document photographed. Every financial record downloaded. Passwords I'd recovered using. Software I'd learned about at work. Account access I'd maintained by setting up alerts he didn't know existed. 6 months of evidence. Organized, annotated, ready for court. I'd hoped I'd never need it. Had prayed I was wrong about everything, but I'd been right, and now I was going to use every single piece of it. Her name was Rachel. I found her Instagram through his phone records. He'd been careful not to save her contact, but he couldn't hide the number he texted most frequently. A simple reverse lookup gave me her name. Social media did the rest. Rachel Chen, 28 years old, marketing consultant. Lived in the same apartment building where David had been paying rent. Her Instagram was public, filled with photos of exotic vacations, expensive restaurants, designer clothes, and there, buried in her posts from 3 weeks ago, was a beach photo. Crystal clear water, white sand, palm trees. And David, standing next to her in swim trunks, his arm around her waist, the caption, read, "Building our empire from paradise." The photo was time-stamped 2 days before our anniversary. The anniversary he'd told me he couldn't celebrate because of an important business trip to Chicago. I screenshot everything, added it to my evidence file, felt nothing. That was new. The feeling nothing part. Used to be betrayal felt like fire. Now it just felt like cold, clear purpose. I went back through our credit card statements, 6 months of charges, looking for anything that didn't make sense. There. A dinner charge from 4 months ago, while David was supposedly on a business trip to Boston. $247 at a French restaurant in downtown Seattle. Where we lived, not Boston. I called the restaurant, asked if they kept itemized receipts that long ago. The manager was hesitant until I explained I was going through a divorce and needed documentation. She faxed it over within an hour. 2 entrees, filet mignon and sea bass, a bottle of wine. Dessert, for 2, and a hotel charge automatically added to the bill from their partner hotel next door, all billed to our joint credit card. The one I paid off every month without looking too carefully at the individual charges. I added it to the file, highlighted the date, cross-referenced it with his calendar where he'd marked Boston business trip. The lies were everywhere once I started looking, and I was just getting started. I called 3 divorce attorneys before I found the right one. The first 2 were sympathetic but cautious, talked about mediation, about keeping things civil, about how expensive litigation could be. The third one was different. Her name was Amanda Hayes, 45 years old, partner at a firm that specialized in high-conflict divorces and asset disputes. I brought my binder to our consultation. 6 months of evidence organized by category, financial records, communications, photos, timeline, everything. Amanda flipped through it in silence, took her time, made notes on a legal pad. When she finished, she looked up at me with something like respect. "Grace, most people come to me with feelings and accusations. You've come with a case. A really solid case. Can we win? We're not just defending, we're going to eviscerate him." I hired her on the spot. David's demands were laid out in the divorce petition. He wanted the condo, the one we'd bought with money from selling my grandmother's house. He wanted half my pension from 15 years of work. He wanted my car. And he wanted alimony. $1,500 a month for 5 years. His justification was that he'd sacrificed his career to support me, that he'd taken the risk of starting a business while I had the safety of a steady job, that his earning potential had been damaged by supporting our marriage. Amanda read it aloud in her office. Then she set the papers down and smiled. He actually wants your dog too. What? Paragraph 7. He's requesting primary custody of Baxter. Baxter, my golden retriever, the dog I'd had for 8 years. The dog David had never walked, never fed, never taken to the vet. Over my dead body. Don't worry. We're going to make sure he gets exactly what he deserves, which is nothing. The first court appearance was 3 weeks later. Temporary orders hearing would set the rules for how things worked while the divorce proceeded. David showed up in a new suit. Expensive, probably $1,500. Looking confident, smug even. His attorney was flashy. Big firm downtown. Lots of bluster about David's rights and my obligations. They painted me as cold, controlling, a woman who'd refused to support her husband's dreams, who'd held the purse strings too tight, who'd driven him away with my lack of emotional availability. The judge listened patiently, asked a few questions. Then Amanda stood up. Your Honor, let's talk about abandonment. She pulled out the bank statement showing the $11.67, showed the transfer David had made, showed that he'd emptied our account the day before, serving me with papers. My client woke up to find her husband gone and her savings cleaned out. And now he's asking for her to pay him? Let's be very clear about who abandoned whom. The judge's expression shifted. Amanda continued, Your Honor, Mr. Carmichael has claimed his business is struggling, that he needs support because his startup isn't profitable. She pulled out the invoices I'd found. Client payments, consulting fees, contract work. These are invoices from Mr. Carmichael's business over the past 14 months. We've verified them with his clients. Total amount, $132,000. David's attorney stood up. Objection. My client's business expenses were paid from a separate business account. Amanda interrupted. These payments were deposited into a personal account my client didn't know existed. We have the account statements. Would you like to see? To them? She spread them across the table, highlighted portions showing deposits and withdrawals. Luxury hotels, designer clothing, jewelry purchases, lease payments for an apartment. This doesn't look like business expenses to me, Your Honor. This looks like someone funding a secret life. The judge picked up the statements, studied them carefully. His jaw tightened. That evening, Amanda and I met at her office. Spread everything across her conference table like we were planning a military campaign. Which, in a way, we were. We need to go deeper, Amanda said. He's got more hidden. I can feel it. We created what she called the evidence wall. A timeline on her whiteboard showing every suspicious transaction, every lie, every piece of proof. Emails from clients showing payment details. Screenshot of his account dashboard from when I'd briefly had access. Photo metadata from vacations, showing he was in Seattle when he claimed to be traveling. Every piece connected to the next. Building a picture of systematic deception. He's going to deny everything. Amanda said, They always do. I know. That's why we have proof. She smiled. You're a natural at this. Ever considered law school? I prefer numbers. They don't lie as much as people do. The deposition was 2 weeks later. David sat across the table from Amanda, his attorney beside him, looking less confident than he had in court. Amanda went through the evidence methodically, showed him the invoices, asked him to explain the discrepancy between his claimed income and his actual deposits. I don't recall those specific numbers, he said. You don't recall earning $132,000? Business income is complicated. There are expenses. We're not asking about expenses. We're asking about deposits to your personal account, the one you didn't tell your wife existed. He shifted in his seat. I needed some financial independence. Amanda slid a document across the table. An email from David to Rachel, dated 2 months ago. Read the highlighted portion out loud, please. David's attorney picked it up. Read it. Went pale. I don't think my client needs to read it, Amanda repeated. David's voice was barely audible. She doesn't even know I moved the money. By the time she figures it out, I'll be gone. The court reporter typed every word. The email changed everything. It proved premeditation, proved David had planned this for months, proved his petition was filed in bad faith. Amanda submitted it as evidence, requested an emergency hearing. The judge reviewed it the same day. "Mr. Carmichael, are you suggesting someone else wrote this email?" David stammered. That was taken out of context. The context appears quite clear. You explicitly stated your intention to hide money from your spouse and leave before she discovered it. I was just venting. You didn't mean to commit financial fraud? The judge's voice was ice. Or you didn't mean to get caught? David's attorney tried to salvage it. Your Honor, marital frustration sometimes leads to perjury, the judge interrupted. Because Mr. Carmichael signed a financial affidavit 3 weeks ago, claiming he had no hidden assets. This email and these bank statements suggest otherwise. Amanda didn't blink, didn't gloat, just sat perfectly still and let the judge's words do the work. Amanda filed a motion for a forensic audit. The judge approved it immediately. A court-appointed accountant spent 2 weeks going through David's finances. Every account, every transaction, every asset. She found 2 more accounts in his name. One was titled Fresh Start Holdings. The other was RD Ventures. Fresh Start had $87,000. RD Ventures had $42,000. Money David had systematically moved over 18 months. Small transfers that wouldn't trigger alerts. Building secret funds while claiming poverty. The forensic accountant's report was damning. Methodical documentation of fraud, hidden assets, false representations. In my professional opinion, she wrote in her conclusion, Mr. Carmichael engaged in deliberate financial misconduct with the intent to deceive his spouse and the court. Amanda filed the report with our response to David's petition, added a countersuit, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, perjury. We're not just defending anymore, Amanda told me. We're going on offense. The apartment was the cherry on top. The forensic accountant had found the lease agreement, a luxury 1-bedroom in a new building downtown, fully furnished. Monthly rent, $4,000. Leased 6 months ago. Paid in full for the year using our joint home equity line of credit, the one David said he needed for business expansion. I'd signed the paperwork trusting him, believing his lies about investing in equipment and hiring staff. Instead, he'd used it to set up a love nest. Amanda filed an emergency motion to freeze the account. Judge approved it immediately. David and Rachel had 48 hours to vacate. The furniture all purchased with marital funds would be sold and proceeds returned to the marital estate. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize the day the locks were changed. Rachel, crying, asking if we could work something out. You should call David, I said. This is between him and his creditors now. She hung up. I blocked the number. 2 weeks before trial, David's attorney requested a meeting. Settlement discussion. We met at Amanda's office. David looked exhausted. The swagger was gone. His expensive suit was wrinkled. My client would like to propose a settlement. His attorney began. In exchange for Mrs. Carmichael dropping the fraud charges, Mr. Carmichael will relinquish his claims to the house and alimony. And? Amanda prompted. And he'll pay back half the money from the joint account. Amanda didn't even pretend to consider it. Here's our counteroffer. Mr. Carmichael returns every dollar he took, all of it, from every account. He relinquishes all claims to any marital asset. He pays Mrs. Carmichael's legal fees, and he signs a confession of judgment for the fraud. That's unreasonable, the judge interrupted. We were in his chambers for the settlement conference. He'd been listening quietly. Mr. Carmichael, you don't negotiate from the floor. You lied under oath. You hid assets. You committed fraud. Your position here is extremely weak, David's attorney tried to respond. The judge held up a hand. I've reviewed the evidence, all of it. I'm inclined to rule in Mrs. Carmichael's favor on every point. If you want to avoid that becoming public record, I suggest you accept her terms. David looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. I stared back, said nothing. He signed. The judgment was entered 3 days later. David lost everything he'd asked for. The house stayed mine. My pension stayed mine. My car stayed mine. Baxter stayed mine. He was ordered to repay $84,000 to the marital estate, everything he'd hidden, minus what he'd already spent on Rachel. His secret accounts were seized, liquidated, funds transferred to me. The fraud charges were dropped per our agreement, but the judgment was public record. Anyone could see what he'd done. Amanda handed me the signed order in her office. This is as close to total victory as divorce gets. What happens to him now? That's not your problem anymore. But Rachel's gone. His business reputation is destroyed. Most of his clients have dropped him. And he's got a massive tax bill coming since he didn't report any of that hidden income. Good. You don't sound satisfied. I'm not satisfied. But I'm finished. That's better. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. Rachel disappeared from social media, deleted her Instagram, LinkedIn profile gone. Like she'd never existed. David's empire, the consulting firm he'd built on lies, folded within 3 months. Clients had left. His business partners sued him for financial impropriety. His office closed. His new accounts, the ones he'd set up for his fresh start, were all seized under the judgment. Every penny went to paying me back. And Baxter? Still by my side. Still sleeping at the foot of my bed. Still greeting me every day like I was the best thing in his world. I took 2 weeks off work after the judgment was final. First vacation in 3 years. Went hiking, read books. Sat in coffee shops, people watching, relearned what it felt like to not be waiting for the next betrayal. Started therapy. Not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand how I'd missed the signs for so long. My therapist asked me if I felt guilty. For the aggressive litigation, for destroying David's life. No, I said. I feel relieved. Because you won? Because I protected myself. Finally. 6 months after the divorce was final, I sold the condo. Too many memories. Too much history. Too much of David still lingering in the walls. I paid off every debt we'd accumulated. Credit cards, the home equity line he'd abused, everything. Took what was left and invested it carefully. Used my financial training to build a portfolio that would grow steadily. Then I booked a trip to Italy. 2 weeks. Rome, Florence, the Amalfi Coast, places I'd always wanted to see, but David had never made time for. I went alone, took myself to museums and restaurants, sat in piazzas, drinking wine and reading, talked to strangers who became temporary friends. And I didn't think about David once. Well, maybe once. In a cafe in Florence, saw a couple arguing at the next table. The woman looked exhausted. The man looked defensive. I recognized that dynamic, had lived it, paid my bill and left. Grateful I wasn't her anymore. The message came 9 months after the judgment. A text from David's number. One I'd blocked but apparently hadn't fully deleted. Grace, can we just talk? I know I messed up. I want to explain. I stared at it for a long moment, thought about all the things I could say, all the ways I could tell him exactly what he'd cost me. Then I deleted the message, but he texted again an hour later. Please, I need closure. So I sent him one photo, no words, the framed judgment order, hanging on the wall of my new home office. Right where I could see it every day, a reminder that I'd won, that I'd protected myself, that I'd chosen my own side when it mattered most. He didn't text again. A year after the divorce, I started consulting. Other women going through divorces would reach out, referred by Amanda or by friends of friends, asking for advice about finances, about documentation, about protecting themselves. I helped them set up separate accounts, taught them how to track spending, showed them how to find hidden assets, not as a business, just as something I could offer, something good that came from something terrible. One woman told me I'd saved her life. She'd been about to sign a settlement that would have left her with nothing. After one conversation with me, she hired a forensic accountant and found $200,000 her husband had hidden. You taught me that peace doesn't beg, she said. It builds. I thought about that a lot, about the difference between begging someone to see your worth and building a life that proves it without their validation. I'd spent years begging David to notice me, to appreciate me, to choose me. Now I was choosing myself. And that was worth more than any settlement. 2 years after the divorce, Amanda called. I got a weird request. Thought you should know. About David? He's in the hospital. Emergency surgery. Listed you as his emergency contact. Are you serious? Apparently, he never updated his paperwork. The hospital called my office asking for your current information. I thought about it for exactly 5 seconds. Tell them to remove me. Permanently. I'm not his emergency anything. Amanda laughed. I already told them that. Just wanted to make sure you knew. Thanks for the heads up. After we hung up, I felt nothing. No guilt, no sympathy, no urge to check on him, just nothing. That's how I knew I'd really moved on. 3 years after that morning when I found $11.67 in our account, I stood in my home office looking at the framed judgment. I thought about taking it down. It had served its purpose. I didn't need the reminder anymore. But I left it up. Not as a trophy, as a lesson. David had tried to destroy me quietly. Methodically, thought he could take everything and leave me with nothing. He underestimated me, thought I was weak because I was kind, thought I wouldn't fight because I'd been patient. He was wrong. I'd exposed him publicly, with facts, with evidence, with the truth he'd tried so hard to hide. The judge had been shocked. David's attorney had been unprepared. Rachel had disappeared. And I was finally free. Not just legally, emotionally, financially, completely. Free from a man who saw me as an obstacle instead of a partner. Free from the weight of trying to save something that was already dead. Free to build a life where I didn't have to hide money or track lies or sleep with one eye open, waiting for the next betrayal. David had taught me an important lesson. Not the one he meant to teach, but the one I needed to learn. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them, document them, and protect yourself. I'd protected myself, and in doing so, I'd learned the most important truth of all. I didn't need him to survive. I didn't need his money or his approval or his presence. I just needed to believe I was worth protecting. And I was. Baxter nudged my hand with his nose. Time for his walk. Time to leave the past behind and step into the evening. I grabbed his leash, locked the door behind me, and walked into my future. Future David had tried to steal but couldn't. Because it was mine. And I'd fought for it. And I'd won. Have you ever discovered someone was hiding money from you? Share your story. Tag someone who needs to hear that protecting yourself financially isn't selfish, it's essential. Because the best revenge isn't anger or pain, it's building a life so strong they can't touch it, even when they try.